everyone, Tiffany here from Tiffany Gordon Cosplay with another cosplay tutorial, and this one is for my World of Warcraft cosplay over the Radiant Lightbringer armor set for the leg covers. And here is the reference image I used to make the leg covers. I first started off by making a blueprint for the leg covers, which you can find available on my website at www.tiffanygordoncosplay.com. See the link below. And using this template, I then cut out all of my EVA foam pieces from 2mm, 4mm, 6mm, and 10mm EVA foam and traced each section using a silver Sharpie. Next, I heat treated each one of these pieces and then used contact cement glue to glue each of the detail pieces down. For the bezel section of the leg covers, I cut out 6mm EVA foam and then sanded it using a sanding drum. As for the gem itself, I wanted to make sure I had an actual cylinder-like shape that was nice and smooth and was easier to make than doing it out of EVA foam. So I decided to 3D model it in Rhino 6 and then 3D print it on my Prusa i3 Mark 2.5 3D printer in ABS filament. And when it was done being printed, I applied contact cement glue to the bottom part of the gem as well as to the underside of the bezel and attached the two pieces together. And then I applied contact cement glue to the bottom bezel and gem, as well to the actual leg covers. And once they were dry, I attached those two pieces together as well. For the trim around the leg covers, I cut out two pieces of 10mm EVA foam for each leg piece. That way I could stack them together and have an extra thick 20mm EVA foam piece. Next, I heat treated each of these pieces with a heat gun, and then applied contact cement glue to the back of each of the pieces before attaching them together to make my 20mm thickness EVA foam piece. And because these pieces had really sharp corners that would have been really hard to get into and sand, I ended up using a box cutter and cutting them each at the corners. This would make it a lot easier to sand each piece to a 45-degree angle. And when each piece was done being sanded, it got another heat treating as well as I applied contact cement glue to each of the edges before attaching all of the pieces back together into the detailed trim. Of course, when doing this technique, there's always a little bit of retouch-up sanding to the corners that you need to do, so I just took my piece back to the workbench and sanded the edges so it was all nice and pretty. I then took the main section of the leg covers as well as the detailed trim and traced it onto it, so that way I knew where to apply my contact cement glue. And then I applied contact cement glue to the back of the detailed trim and to the top half of the leg covers, and once they were both dry, attached each piece together to make one piece. I then repeated by trimming the excess EVA foam around the edges and rounded the back side using a sanding drum so it was nice and even. For the kneecap detail piece, I again cut out two pieces of 10mm EVA foam, glued them together, and then I used a box cutter to trim off the top part at a 45 to make it less messy to sand. Next, I followed by heat treating the entire piece with a heat gun, and then glued this piece to a 2mm EVA foam sheet. And with the help of my template, I aligned the kneecap as well as the main leg cover piece together and traced where it would lie using a silver Sharpie. And then I round a little bit of the part where it would attach on the back so that way it wouldn't be so bulky and it would sit a little bit more flush. And the next step was yet again more contact cement glue, waiting for both sides to be completely dry before attaching them together. Now, I wanted the shape not to be flat against the leg. I wanted it to curve around. So what I did was I heat treated the entire piece with a heat gun, and then to maintain that shape while the piece was still hot, I ended up wrapping it with masking tape. This way it would cool off in that shape. And you can see here the results of doing it once the masking tape is removed. Now, for the straps on the back part of these leg covers, I ended up cutting out rectangle shapes from 4mm EVA foam, cutting out little circles for the whole parts, and then rounded each of the edges using a sanding drum. I then traced where it would be attached onto the leg covers using a silver Sharpie once again, and attached together using contact cement glue. Now, I prefer my armor to look like it's had a little bit of battle damage, so I ended up going back to my workbench and I got out a disc and ended up cutting holes and lines all throughout the armor to give it some more character. There were a few bit of seams that I needed to fill, so I ended up using Quick Seal and applied it into those pieces, and I had to wait 24 hours for it to dry. And here's the pieces once they were all finished and done with the EVA foam part. I then applied 3 heavy coats of Plastidip to the entire piece and waited for each coat to dry before applying another. And once the Plastidip was dry, I then applied a base coat of turquoise airbrush paint to all of the blue sections, followed by a coat of blue airbrush paint and black around all of the edges to add a little bit more shadowing. And when the paint was dry, I then covered it with masking tape and then painted a base coat of yellow airbrush paint to the entire piece, followed by a combination of a yellow, orange, brown, and gold mix of paint to give it more of an orangey kind of glow, followed by a little bit of an orangey brown and some highlights in certain sections, and then a dark brown black color in all of the shadow areas. And once all the yellow paint was dry, I then covered up all of those sections with masking tape as well. For the next layer, I painted a black coat of airbrush paint for the base, just so it would cover up all of the previous yellow airbrush paint, followed by another silver gray color. Then I added shadows, followed by highlights. And once all of that coat of paint was dry, I then masked off the entire pieces, leaving just the belt straps showing. I then applied a base coat of black airbrush paint, followed by a light brown color, and then a dark black brown color for the shadows. And here's what the leg covers look like so far once all of the tape is removed from the painting layers. I wanted to make it pop a little bit more, so I then went back by hand with some black airbrush paint and a paintbrush and went around all the edges as well as all of the battle damage. I went in and added a little bit of black to make it look a little bit more bam. And when the paint was dry, I then applied a coat of satin clear enamel spray paint to the entire piece. The last step was to cut out strips of Velcro and attach them to the belt straps and to the back of the leg covers using contact cement glue, and then my leg covers were done. Thanks guys for watching this cosplay tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed it, and if so, remember to press the follow button, and much love guys!